Hi, everybody. Hello, Filmatics. Welcome back to part 3 with Stephen L. Sears. We're having such a good time, and we're because I guess maybe we're Florida Gators, and he's also Florida Gator. He's kind of like has a double personality. He's a Florida Gator and a Seminole, right? Let's welcome Stephen back to the show. Hi, Steve.
Hello there. Sorry this thing has gone on. We're into our third part of this. If you stayed with us, bless you, my friends.
Yeah, hey, sometimes we just have such a great time.
We're having fun.
Yeah, because Stephen, you've written like, oh my God, worked on as an author, screenwriter, and producer from television, film, animation, digital media, and gameplay from our favorite films such as Riptide, The A-Team, Walker, Texas Rangers, Jesse Hawks, Superboy, SPIES, and from XENA, Warrior Princess, to even SHEENA. And then, so we kind of were getting
XENA to SHEENA.
Yeah, from XENA to SHEENA. Hey, do you have any XENAs coming up, or any more of those, or anything like that in the horizon?
No, nothing with XENA coming up. Although we are scheduled to have another XENA convention. I mean, there were so many, there were like 20-something conventions, and then they stopped for a while, and this is a reunion convention, which has been postponed because of COVID, but it should be coming up in November. And a shout out to the XENA fans, the Xenites. They are the most incredible fandom. They are incredibly generous in charity and works and social programs and progress. I mean, they have completely humbled me. So I want to give a shout out to them. Many of them I know through Facebook, I know from the conventions, and I'm proud to say many of them are personal friends of mine.
Oh, wow.
Shout out to fandom. Everybody out there working in the industry, never underestimate the power of fandom.
And so they're called Xenites?
Xenites is the name that, I forgot where that genealogy was, but somebody a long time ago, the name Xenites came up, and that's kind of stuck. So, yeah Xenites they are.
Yeah, so those are XENA Warrior Princess fans where they can dress up as XENA the Warrior and all the other characters in the TV show. That's really popular, right?
Oh, yeah. And, we had such wonderful performers on the show, people in front of the camera and behind the camera. We made ourselves accessible to the fandom. We had a studio, Universal Studio, was very understanding of the fandom, which was kind of a new thing. Studios back then used to be very protective of their work. So if fans wanted to do homages or do T-shirts and stuff like that, they got a lot of cease and desist. But Universal realized these fans, they love the show. I think the only rule they had was you don't make merchandise to sell for profit because you'll be in competition. But for charitable things and for their own enjoyment, you can criticize studios, and certainly I can criticize studios, but I give Universal MCA a big thumbs up on the way they handled the fandom at that time. So it was encouraged. And what happened is it grew. And today, I mean, we still have such a strong fandom. Even the official conventions, when they ended, the fans kept getting together to have their own small conventions, and a Xenite retreat, which is very popular. That happens every year up in the mountains. It's a camping retreat. You learn Amazonian archery and talk about the shows and paint yourself blue and howl at the moon like Amazons. It's really fun. It is just a lot of fun.
Wow. I mean, I feel so boring. I mean, I write my adventures. Imagine
how I feel.
I write my adventures. Oh my God. I guess because I guess I'm a prude or a square. I mean, everyone's like, what do you do for fun? I go, I write stories and I walk my husky. And they're like, oh my God.
Well, I understand that perfectly. I mean, people ask me, what do you do? And I say, well, I lie for a living. I do. I make stuff up.
You lie for a living.
I do. I tell them eventually I'll figure out what I want to do with my life. Until then, I'll just keep doing this.
I love that. What do you do for a living, Stephen L. Sears? I lie for a living.
I actually spoke at the annual gathering of the Mensa Society, which is the high IQ society, several years ago. And my entire speech was about that. My entire talk was about how my job is to lie, to create like I said about the movies in the first installment, the movies that I liked, I created worlds that didn't exist with characters that had never been born in situations that are just hard to believe. And I convince you it's 100% true. I'm a liar. I'm also a master propagandist, and I'm a manipulator. That is what I do, and I'm really good at it. I do it for entertainment, so my superhero power is for good. But, as this lecture was about, it's the same technique that is used for propaganda, for manipulation in politics, and manipulations of entire nations. It's the same technique. I just tell stories with it. Oh my gosh, I'm powerful. I didn't realize that until now.
I love that you use your
I want to be a
superpowers for good.
supervillain. I think I'll work on that.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, like, we were talking off, like we were waiting. I was telling Steven, to the audience, that I write children's stories and do the voiceovers for Enchanting Book Readings podcast, and it is ranked top 1%. So I get to do the voices because, let's face it, during COVID, no one's coming to your house to help you out with your podcast, and so I had to literally learn how to do the voices. But like you said, like it was really fun to play I would play the evil witch or the evil bad guy, and I'd be the good guy and the bad guy all together, and it's fun, right? Playing.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And when you're writing, it's the same thing because you hear the voices in your head. The characters are alive, and you become the different characters. Just like when you're doing the different voices, you become that character. So you become all of those things. Basically, we get paid for things that would have us burned at the stake 200 years ago.
Oh my God. Get burned at the stake. I have a question. So you said that you hear the characters talking. Like, yeah, that I was telling you, I was sleeping. It was like about 5 a.m. and I had this. This is really sad when you haven't made it yet. Like the biggest thing is like you don't have a name. You don't have a name. And so I was like, I have no name, and I was kind of like, I have no name, and like it was just I was obsessed with like the fact that I don't have a name or no credits. And then I ended up making this really the story just popped out, and I heard it. I just heard it talking, and it was like the little yellow duck with no name, and it came out so cute, so adorable, so sweet, so charming. So so I want to ask you, when you're walking around or whatnot, do you hear your characters talking and get ideas? Like, is that part of your process, or do you want to share anything?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I just did another lecture recently, actually for the regional Mensa group. They meet several times a year. About this topic, which was my discussion was the comparisons of the creative mind with the minds of quantum physicists. When you think about what a quantum physicist does, they conceptualize things that are just impossible to believe, but they're doing it to try to understand nature and physics and science. So the concepts that they come up with are initially like, that's ridiculous. How do you make that believable? And they do. They go through the process. Same thing with the creative mind. And it's a response to the question that I get, I'm sure you get, which is, where do you get your ideas? How does this happen? And for me, there are some writers who are very studied. They know the process. They know the steps. They've read it in books. They've had it taught to them, and they know how to follow those steps. Some of them are very studied. The studied writer is the person who plays chess. Every time they write one thing, they figure out where that goes, and then they find the consequences, and then they rewrite, etc. And then there's the intuitive, which is my category, which is this just appears. It's just suddenly in my head. It's difficult to work with, but the ideas that I have and the characters appear fully formed. I can't explain it. It just happens. Then I have to actually translate it into a script or a screenplay so other people can believe it as well. But it goes back to that whole idea, like you said, you're walking around, and the thing where you had the question about what's my name. The first screenplay I ever wrote, the second pilot I sold, was called Harry O'Fell and the Day Hell Froze Over. And the whole thing came out of one line with my with Bert Pearl, my writing partner back then. We were having a conversation, and he made a comment. He said, yeah, when hell freezes over, responding to me about something. And I said, yeah, when hell freezes over, you'll owe me. And then I thought, wait a minute, if hell froze over, everybody would owe everybody something if they've ever used that phrase. And that started this story process in my head, where I ended up writing a screenplay about a detective who is hired to work for hell because Lucifer has stolen the key to the furnace and they can't find him. They have to get him back. So they hire this guy before hell freezes over. That just kind of like
cool.
popped into my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was cool. I managed to sell that as a pilot series for CBS. It didn't end up being produced. I got all the rights back, and it's actually one of the novels that I'm writing right now. But yeah, it was just there. I can't explain it. There was nothing quantifiable about it.
Wow. So you see the whole world and everything fully, like, wow, that's amazing.
It's more that it's interesting because part of the problem with doing the lecture on this is that you have to explain it in a linear fashion. It doesn't happen that way with me. So it's more like I see the universe, I see the world, I hear the characters, they're all there. Then I have to make sense of them. And that's what the screenwriting process is. So it's combination of logical, mostly emotional. There's just so many components that are really hard to understand until you experience them. I guess experiential is the biggest word on that. So I'm insane. I'll just say it right now. I am actually insane. For some reason, as they say, the difference between insanity and eccentricity is money.
Oh man, you're so like likable and so smart, and you have all these great shows. And the Jeff Sturgeons, is that Preston Sturges? Is that related to anything with the Sturgeon, Preston Sturgeon?
No.
Okay, so it's just completely different, right?
Yeah. Jeff Sturgeon is actually an amazing artist, and he had done this series of artwork off of the concept of a post-apocalyptic world where cities floated in the air to escape the carnage that happened on Earth, centering around the Yellowstone eruption. The Yellowstone caldera is actually one of the most active volcanoes, and it's a huge super volcano. This is true. I'm not making this stuff up. And if it ever blows, and it has in the past, and it's still active, that's why all the geysers are there. If it ever blows, that will change the entire, certainly the North America, but change the entire world. So he conceptualized through his artwork that humanity tried to escape this by floating cities. And that evolved into this whole idea of how the cities would relate, how they would govern themselves. And just, he put a call out for a bunch of authors. That simplifies it. He knows a lot of great authors. And he put out a call and he said, I'd love to do a book about this. And they all responded to it. Kevin Anderson, as I mentioned earlier, he has a story in there. Mike Resnick, amazing storyteller. I think this was his last story before he passed away. So yeah. So that was it. So that's who Jeff Sturgeon is.
Oh, okay, great. And then you said you really loved Aliens versus Predator, the Ultimate Prey collection. How'd that come about?
That I was contacted by the editors of the who are working on that particular anthology. It's for Titan Books, Disney Publishing. I think Fox Publishing is also involved because it's two different franchise movies coming together. And I was contacted to write, to submit a story. I should put it that way. With most anthologies, you submit a story before they decide whether they're going to pay for it. The idea being is if they say no to your story, you can submit it to another anthology. The problem with this, obviously, it's very specific, Aliens versus Predators. So, if they had said no, it probably was a story that would have died. But fortunately, they said yes. And the story that I wrote is, interestingly enough, it's historically based. It takes place in the late 1700s. And all of the references that are in the story historically, I don't want to give away too much about it. Everything in there is absolutely true. The only fictional thing are the aliens and the predators. So I'm also a bit of a history buff. So being able to pull all that together was fun and challenging at the same time. So, and it also, being from Florida, there's little connectivity to Florida and to my hometown of St. Augustine. There's little mentions in there. Late 1700s, of course.
Love it.
So, but that was fun. And yeah, that was a major release. It's out there, probably still on bookstores now. Bookshelves out there.
Yeah.
I don't think we mentioned Stalag-X earlier. That one you may not be able to find on bookshelves anymore.
Oh no. So but this is the one that can you tell us how you got your film deal from that and what's going on with that?
Yeah, that was Stalag-X, the graphic novel, written by myself and Kevin J. Anderson. Interior art by Margaret. that was something that Kevin and I developed, I told in the last segment. So we got it out there with the Vault. The Vault got it published, and during its initial run, it was out at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, a bunch of other outlets. So I had also been sending out the material to different connections I had in the studios to see if anyone was interested. So we got an email from the publisher saying somebody's trying to contact you about acquiring the movie rights. And we're like, okay, we'll talk to him. Let's see who it is. So it turned out to be Francis Lawrence. And Francis is one of my favorite directors, just by coincidence. Francis directed 3 of the Hunger Games movies. He also directed I Am Legend, Red Sparrow, one of my favorite movies. He's just an incredible director. He concentrates on character within the sci-fi realm. He usually works with prior material. And so he was reaching out to see if the rights were available. And we talked with him and his associate Cameron and really enjoyed it. We just enjoyed talking to them, what their plans were and how they wanted to approach this. So he asked for a shopping deal so that he could take it around to the studios and see if he could get some interest in it. So we agreed to that. And then COVID hit, and most of the studios shut down, and as far as actually looking for new material. So it had to wait. Then as COVID was coming out, Francis had signed a deal with New Republic Pictures. They did Rocket Man, 1917. So they're a great company. And he's told them, this is what I want to do. I want to do this as part of my my lineup. And so we just finished negotiating the deal with New Republic Pictures for a feature film, possibly a TV series, but right now focusing on a feature film based on the original graphic novel. So we're very excited about that. That just came out in the trades, I think, about 4 weeks ago, about that arrangement and how we set it up. So, and the funny thing is, afterwards, I was I was trying to figure out how he got the book. You know, because I was like patting myself on the back and saying, yeah, I sent it out there and I got it to the studios and somehow I got to him. Oh, I'm so proud I did my work. So I asked his associate Cameron how they came by the book. You know, was it through Paramount? You know, how did they get it? Was it executive over at Fox? And he said, I think we picked it up at Barnes & Noble.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Which, by the way, is the best way for this to happen, because then it's not somebody didn't push it on him. They found it and they liked it. That's the best way for it to happen.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's like if our audience is listening, go, well, where can I get the novel it's called STALAG-X.
Stalag. STALAG-X. Stalag was what the
Stalag.
The references to the concentration camps during World War II that the Nazis had set up. So it's called Stalag-X, and I believe you can still find it on Amazon. Hopefully. Well, I haven't checked in a while. That would be something for the Vault. The Vault Publishing is the company that handles it.
And do you
looking right now in there?
Yeah. And do you like because it's co-created by you and with New York Times bestselling author Kevin J. Anderson. Do you like writing with a partner?
Good question. Very good question. And by the way, I just looked on Amazon. It's still available.
Great.
Yes and no. It really has to be the right person. I mentioned when I first started out, I had a writing partner, Bert Pearl. Bert and I worked very well together. We were best friends. So, you know, we liked each other. We enjoyed each other. And we would always kind of go back and forth on how we would write things. And we're just having a nice, giddy, fun time with it. What you find out later on is that working with some writers, keep in mind, creativity is involved. We all have different ways to do that. Egos are involved. Pride is involved. The business is involved. It's not that easy. So I can point to, with my career, 38 plus years, working with I don't know how many different creative people, I could probably point to maybe 5 people that I could, without any qualification, say, absolutely, I could co-write with them without a problem. Not a problem. After that, you end up with a level where you basically have to negotiate things. Hopefully, both of you are all keeping an eye on the project. You're not doing it because you want to win an argument. You want the project to be better. That's always been my attitude. My name's on it, going to be on it one way or the other. So if you have a great idea and it's better than my idea, absolutely, let's go with it because it's going to make me look good.
Yeah, I
So
agree with
it
that.
does get. Yeah, there are some people like I have tried to work with and it didn't work out. But in general, even with that, that's in the minority. Maybe like 3 people that we've remained friends, but it was kind of like, yeah, this isn't going to work, so let's not do this.
Yeah, because and you're saying TV is a very collaborative process because there's a writer's room usually. How many people are usually on your in your writer's room? Because you've obviously been in the business a very long time. Like, what's the average, or is there anything you can tell us about the writer's room? Or
There's nothing average about it. It depends on the show. You could have a writer's room where, if the show is only dealing the majority with freelance writers, then you have people who come and go for each meeting, but they're not a stable part of the staff. But I've been on shows where the staff numbered like 8 or 9 people. And then I've been on other shows where you only had 3 people and you had to break the stories yourself. It really varies. And
okay,
writers' rooms are extremely, when they're done well, I refer to them as like a creative bouncy room. Like those castles, those inflatable castles you see at kids' parties.
yeah,
The kids all jump in and they bounce around, they have a great time. It's kind of like that. And the first time I ever saw it in action was back in Riptide when Bert and I first started out. And when we ended up on staff, listening to these incredibly creative producers, Stephen Cannell, Babs Grayhowski, Frank Lupo, Tom Blumquist, Patrick Hapsburg, Larry Herzog, all of these incredibly seasoned, experienced producers, hearing them in a story room, we struggled to keep up at first because they speak a shorthand, something that I now can do. Everybody understands what you're saying. But back then, it was just like the most amazing high energy process. So it is fun and it's exhausting at the same time.
wow. And then, what is your favorite? Do you like producing more, or being the creator, or is there a difference? Like how you?
I like cashing the checks. No, well, I do like that, but that's a good question. Well, first of all, writing will always be right there because that's the storytelling. That's the core of storytelling. That will always be number one. Even though, as I said, I'm not really good at listing favorites. That absolutely, that's the core of who I am. I do enjoy producing a television show, and it is the most exhausting, frustrating, wearying, angry thing you could possibly consider, and yet it's by far the most rewarding thing
Wow.
because you're putting it together. There's so many different elements. And when I'm running a show, I want everybody to have that type of feeling. So everybody in the production, I want them to see their fingerprints in the final product. So, I've always tried to keep an open door policy for everybody, including right down to the set level, with the people who are actually moving things around and making everything work. So I do enjoy it, but while I'm doing it, man, does it tear at you. It's just so involved and so much work. But I love seeing the results of it, even though I rarely go back and watch my old episodes. I'm just too critical to do that.
Yeah. And then what how do you feel about the film? Like it seems like a lot of films are coming from graphic novels or comic books these days. Do you see like that's going to continue, or um
It will. We go through cycles. We always go through cycles. Marvel has done an incredible job of creating their universe. Duh, we know that. What they have really capitalized on, brilliantly capitalized on, is our childhood. Because Marvel and DC Comics, superhero, things like that, they're a part of the childhood that has continued through. And one thing about comics, whether you're boomers or millennials or Gen Xers, you have a memory of those comics somehow. And a lot of this business now, because there's so much money involved, is about branding. And by branding, it means instant recognition. Somebody sees it, and even if they don't know anything about the movie, if they see Spider-Man, I'm going to go and see that because I recognize it. As opposed to Webmaster, which might be a Spider-Man version, but you're not going to see that. Webmaster, who knows anything about that? Sounds like somebody working their own web page. So a lot of it is just the branding of it that is familiar to people. That's why we see a lot of those particular shows, and especially superhero shows. And when they're done well, yeah, I mean, you know, I sometimes I hate to admit I love the Marvel universe. I was a DC Comics guy when I was a kid, but I love the Marvel universe because they've integrated it so well. And my biggest fear is that I'm going to die before I see the resolution of the Thor stories.
The Thor stories. Oh my gosh, yeah. The resolutions. Let's get or the Avengers and yeah. And speaking of,
Any of those.
yeah, I love like the Avengers and TV shows like that. Do you think those are ever going to be reprised or like we're just so advanced now with like special effects and it's just action and just how it's is there any differences? Do you think or like you said everything comes around? Um,
It it does. I think everything that is good goes back to character. Um, One thing that our special effects have become so incredibly sophisticated, and they will continue to do that. I point out to people that a lot of the stunts that we did on the Cannell shows, A Team and Riptide and Hardcastle, McCormick, those kind of shows, we did them. We didn't have computers to generate that. If you saw a helicopter flying low to a semi truck and somebody jumping out of the truck on top of the semi, none of that was green screen. We did it. We
oh my gosh.
actually did it. So these days, everything is so sophisticated. Even a lot of the backgrounds are shot completely either on green screen or with gigantic 6K screens. We get a little bit anesthetized to the special effects. And what happens then is that what do you have left? Special effects or story or character? Well, story and character is really what attract us over the long period. You might go, if you remember one of the best special effects movies you've ever seen with gigantic robots and whatever characters like that. Let's say that you saw it 10 years ago. Well, go watch it now. The technology is going to look incredibly dated to you. However, that little rom-com or Driving Miss Daisy or something like that, which was all character-based, that survives the test of time because it's not effects, it's character. And that's what we identify with.
Yeah, that's why I'm a big fan of Criterion films. Speaking of, what is one of your favorite Criterion movies? Do you have any favorites? Or a couple ones you want to chat real quick? 'Cause
I know.
We have a few minutes left.
It's funny, the Criterion collection. I remember when I got my first Laserdisc player, that was really big. Criterion collection. There's a few movies that stand out to me, and I can't define really why. Well, I can in some cases, but I can't say whether other people would resonate with them. There was a movie called The Ninth Configuration, which I liked when I saw it. It's an older movie about an army doctor who has to oversee a psychiatric facility of soldiers who have kind of gone a little crazy. And again, if you watch the movie, you'll see it's all psychology. It's all about the mental condition and about that particular character, which is probably why I like it. There's a movie called Cross Creek, another older movie, which is the story of Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, who wrote The Yearling, was one of her most popular books. She was living in Cross Creek, Florida. And it's just her story of this woman who lived in New York, got a divorce, and decided to move to Central Florida to try to write, to basically get everything out of her head so she could write. And she kept sending stories to the publisher, these stories she would make up, and the publisher kept rejecting the stories. But what she experienced there became the source of her greatest success. And the cast is just amazing. Mary Steenburgen, Malcolm McDowell, Alfre Woodard, Rip Torn, Dana Plato, just an amazing cast. And it's this little small movie most people haven't heard about. As you might have noticed, those two movies are not sci-fi heavy technology movies. They're, again, character-based movies.
Well, Stephen, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And everyone check out his book and stay tuned for his amazing movie that's going to be coming out, STALAG-X, and check out his amazing book, The Non-User-Friendly Guide for Aspiring TV Writers. Thanks so much, Stephen.
Thank you.
We had so much fun. I want to thank our lovely viewers for making us hit #1 and Countries Weekly. And if you take a second to download the podcast, subscribe, and if you'd like to support the podcast, buy me coffee sneakies. Thank you so much. Until next week, stay safe and be healthy.